I'm Ramona Deering in St. John's, and this is the Crosstalk Phone-In. Today, we would like to know if you would ever dream of living off the grid. That is exactly what Mike and Georgina Parsons are doing. I suspect that you have heard of them by now. They're the husband and wife team who will stay on Little Bay Islands after everyone else resettles. They will be living off the grid, and they're almost doing that fully right now. What about you? Would you ever dream of living off the grid? The phone numbers to call in, 722-7111, or toll free at 1-800-563-8255. So if you have any questions for Mike and Georgina about the extensive and impressive plans that they have made to be as self-sufficient as possible, feel free to call in and speak with them. Or if you've got plans yourself to go off-grid, or maybe you've got a cabin already or one that's in the planning stages that is off-grid, let us know about that. And again, the numbers to call in, 722-7111, or 1-800-563-8255. Maybe you could never imagine yourself living without any neighbors around, which is what the Parsons are choosing to do as they stay on Little Bay Islands after resettlement. Or maybe the idea of cutting your own wood and having some chickens and having solar panels, etc., really appeals to you. Let us know how this shakes down for you, because no matter who you talk to, people have strong opinions one way or the other. Some of my colleagues here at CBC is telling me that they're so excited to hear this show today, but that they themselves could not see themselves living off grid, and others saying, oh, yes, in a heartbeat. And I've got a couple of books to give away on the show today. Since it is adventurous to go off grid, we've got an adventure book for you. This is Justin Barber's book about his adventures trekking. It's called Man and Dog Through the Newfoundland Wilderness. And also from beloved Newfoundland novelist Gary Collins, his latest novel called The Place. So we will draw a couple of names randomly and let you know the names of the winners at the end of the show. 722-7111 or 1-800-563-8255. So enough of me now. Time to turn things over to Mike and Georgina. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing great, Ramona.
It's great to speak with you. And Georgina, how are you doing?
I'm also doing great.
So both of you are on a landline from Little Bay Islands, and you're sharing two different phone extensions.
Yeah.
Very high tech. And you're not going to have that landline for that much longer, right, Georgina?
No, that's right. I guess they're telling us by December 31st. That remains to be seen, but that's kind of our rough date.
And so, aside from the phone line, Georgina, are you guys completely off-grid now?
Almost. Like our house is off-grid, so we're currently producing our own electricity, like solar power, we'll say. And but we still have our shed on the grid, we'll call it. So once the power goes off, we just have a little small project to kind of bring that shed over to our solar system. And we have our own well dog, but we're still relying on town water for now, but that's all we got left to do is get our pump and hook that in. So we're really close to being completely off the grid.
It sounds like so much work. Mike, tell me about some of the preparations that you've had to make for this. The solar, how did you decide on the solar, and roughly how much did that cost?
Well, we've been planning for this for quite some time. We've talked about it actually for years, myself and Georgina, before we even moved back to Newfoundland. So it's been on our long-term horizon for quite some time.
You'd been living in Ontario prior to that,
yes,
right?
And we've been back on Little Bay Islands now for about 2.5 years. And but we didn't pull the trigger on anything because up until the summer, the resettlement thing wasn't wasn't a sure thing, and so it's only say late summer that we started to implement the plans to actually do this, because at that point we knew resettlement was a go, and that by the end of the year all the service would be cut. The solar system that we have now, we've invested about Solar and the backup generators and stuff, probably close to $25,000. We have 12 solar panels and a battery bank of 12 as well, and 4,000 watt inverter, and we have 2 backup generators, and and those are only those are emergency in case you get extended periods where you get really bad weather, which of course we all know can happen in Newfoundland. But
Yes.
we've been at our home now on off the grid for I guess Georgina, 6 weeks now.
Yeah, or more. We're almost 2 months.
So and during that time, I must say we've been very, very pleased with the solution. We haven't had to run the generator at all, and we're producing the energy that we need. Now, one of the things about moving off the grid and solar is you become very conscious about your energy consumption. So myself and Georgina are always checking to make sure things are unplugged, or we only use things when we need to use them, and we're conscious about lights and stuff. But overall, very happy with the solution.
And so how much power will your solar panels generate?
Well, on an ideal day, we have 12 panels, and they're 315 watts each. So you're looking at, in an ideal day, you could produce, probably, 5,000, watts of power. And in most days, we don't use anywhere near that. So it's basically just topping up our batteries. And so that's kind of the way that works.
Oh, that sounds really impressive. And Georgina, what kind of storage strength do you have in your batteries? How long can you hold on to that power?
Well, so
Any
far
excess?
what we find, and we initially went with a smaller system, and just last weekend the solar guys were here and we expanded a little bit. But as Mike mentioned, we've never had to charge our systems back up. So far, as Mike mentioned, we're producing enough solar that we can top those batteries up, and we've never used up enough of that to bring it down to a level where we had to charge it. So obviously that might be a bit different the winter if we get an extended periods of snow or whatever.
Yeah, it's going to be such an interesting winter for you two. And, I haven't even referred to what I think is a very emotional time for people who've lived on Little Bay Islands. And this has been a particularly busy week, as the last few ones have been. What's life been like this week on Little Bay Islands, Georgina?
So we've seen a few families come with U-Hauls and trailers, and, more people are starting to leave, we'll say. But at the same time, there's a few people starting to come in. Not many, but one gentleman in particular has bought a couple of properties. So he's bringing in supplies to kind of start a wharf for himself to be able to come by boat. But for the most part, we're seeing more people starting to leave. And like I said, that's very emotional, even for those that really want to go and those that, are going, but their hearts are still here. There's a lot of different emotions for sure.
Oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And just to say a warm hello to anyone who is listening to us from Little Bay Islands today. Yeah, I can't imagine what this kind of transition is like. And Mike, you two have been helping people move. So what's it been like for you this week to be saying those goodbyes?
Well, it's all very bittersweet for us. I mean, it's as Georgina said, it's super sad to see these people, which we consider our extended family, trying to pack up a lifetime of stuff to take to their new homes or whatever and stuff. So, and people just, it brings up a lot of memories for people, and you kind of hear them, wistfully thinking back to, I remember this or I remember that, and, it's you can tell the strain and the emotion on the people. I mean, so it's it's bittersweet in the sense that there's all that emotion about leaving, but depending on who you talk to, there's also excitement about moving forward. I mean, this resettlement thing has been on the go for 8 years here in this community, and it's really taken its toll. And people thought it might never happen, and a number of people have kind of put their lives on hold waiting for it to happen. And so now that it is, they're anxious, and many of them are quite ready to leave. And so, but on the flip side for us is, of course, we're super excited about this new adventure that myself and Georgina, have planned out and are looking forward to. So it's a real mix of emotions.
Yeah, I can imagine. I want to share a couple of comments that are coming in. We just had one listener tweet into us at CBC Crosstalk to say that he could live off grid in a heartbeat, but providing that he could sell the house and the cabin. So I don't know if that would entail in his dreams then building a different house. He can call in if he would like to tell us more about that. And also, Chelsea wrote in on the Facebook page for CBC Newfoundland and Labrador saying that she dreams of communal living off the grid. So she would be looking for, people to share that experience with. You two are going to go it on your own. And again, if anyone in the listening audience has any questions for Mike and Georgina about their plans, these do have a couple of different dimensions here. They've made some very practical plans to live off grid, as you've been hearing, but there is also an emotional dimension, as you've been hearing as well. So feel free to call in and ask them questions. Also, if you yourself have plans or hopes or dreams to live off grid one day, or if that's something you just know you would never, ever be interested in doing, what would you find the hardest about living off grid? Give us a shout, 722-7111 or 1-800-563-8255. Justin wrote in to say, I would like to reduce my reliance on Newfoundland and Labrador, on Newfoundland Power, that is, but I have no desire to live in the middle of nowhere. Georgina, what's your response to that?
I completely understand him, and we joke around, actually, when everyone asks us, we joke around and say, well, we're just crazy. But we know this isn't for everybody, but for us, it's an important part of what we wanted to do. We wanted to be somewhere remote, and that appeals to us because we, like you said, one listener wrote in and said they'd like the communal living, but that wouldn't be for us because a big part of what we want to do is to be here alone and experience that. Now, don't get me wrong. When we see our first friends come back in the boats in April or May through that tickle, we're going to be happy to see them. But we kind of get the best of both. So we'll be alone for, several months, and then we'll have the people that still want to come back here, and they're also going off grid. So I guess we get the best of both worlds.
But that's one way of looking at it. I'm just thinking, okay, so when the first people come back for the summer in April to Little Bay Island, you're going to be ransacking their bags and looking for fresh fruit.
They'll all probably have orders from me in advance.
You might have a craving for a Big Mac or something like that to come on through. One thing to bring into the conversation here, it's really interesting what municipalities are doing in terms of reducing their dependence on electricity. Makovic has just installed solar panels on the roof of its arena, and it's gone off needing diesel fuel. Still early stages, so we'll see how that holds up over the grayer days, as both of you have alluded to. The town of Holyrood, the council, tossing around the idea at this point of could they be a net zero town council? In other words, not, make changes so that they're using alternative energy and not drawing any electricity. The town of Paradise looking at a review and audit of its municipal energy usage to see if there are ways it can, reduce reliance on electricity. And of course, some of this is coming from fears about power rate increases because of the Muskrat Falls Hydro Project. And then also, I think people are interested in going greener. So there's lots of different angles on this one, right? And you guys will have lots of experience to share with others. Okay, so I've got to ask you this question, Mike, because when I think of going off the grid, I also think about, okay, what does that mean? 30-second showers, and are they going to be cold?
You have to think about all that stuff. I mean, right now we have a huge pot of water on our wood stove, Of course, we have the fire in all the time this time of the year, so that supplies us with our hot water. But conservation is a major part of going off the grid. I mean, anything that you kind of took for granted, like you said, long showers and having lights on in every house and every appliance plugged in, and just stuff like having your toaster on or your coffee maker and stuff. These are all things that you have to be conscious of, and in some cases you have to give up. Hot water being one of them. I mean, the current solar systems today, certainly don't support things like electric stoves and hot water tanks or clothes dryers or anything. So you have to look at alternatives. I mean, Georgina has she purchased a rack online that she can put in front of the stove, and we use that to dry our clothes so it's all about, as much about conservation as it is about the production of energy.
And you do have a really, I think, this is something that I personally have been interested in. You've got a really interesting way to produce hot water, aside from obviously having the kettle on top of your wood stove in the colder months. That makes sense, obviously. But tell me about how you will take showers.
Well, we have there's a system, hot water on demand systems, which are actually becoming quite popular, and they're run basically by propane. And they don't require any electricity and stuff, so you can purchase those and install those into your existing water system, and you basically have hot water on demand. It doesn't require a tank. It basically heats up your water as you need it. So right now we have a small system because I've been just kind of experimenting with it before we make a bigger investment, because those things are quite expensive. And so, if you want kind of the luxury of hot water, then your hot water on demand system that uses propane, that's where you're going to look.
Yeah, interesting. And then I guess you're not wasting water as it's running long ways through pipes. It's right at the source.
Yes, and if I could just jump in,
sure.
Friends of ours installed one this past weekend. They're here like pretty much half the year, and I was there actually when they tested it out, so it was pretty cool. Pardon the pun, to be there as he was out, like, turning it on, and I had my hand under the tap, and literally it was less than a minute. I'm like, it's warming, and by 30 seconds it was at a really comfortable temperature where you could shower or do your dishes.
Wow, that's amazing.
It was fascinating, so we may invest in a similar system to what he bought.
My guests on the Crosstalk phone in today are Mike and Georgina Parsons. They're joining us on the phone line from Little Bay Islands. We're making use of their phone line while they still have it. They intend to remain on Little Bay Islands after it is completely resettled. People are moving out right now. The community voted in favor of resettling, but Mike and Georgina Parsons want to stay. They will be living off grid. They're essentially doing that right now. We'd love to hear from you. Would you ever dream of living off the grid yourself? Don't forget, we've got a couple of great books to give away. Gary Collins' novel, The Place, and Justin Barber's adventure story, Man and Dog, about his trek through the Newfoundland wilderness. And the number 722-7111 or 1-800-563-8255. And we've got Kyle, who is calling in from near Mobile on the Southern Shore. Thanks for that, Kyle.
Hello.
Would you ever dream of living off grid?
Yes, actually, I just heard about Mike and Georgina there earlier, and I'd just like to say congratulations to them for trying to do this. We've been living off grid for about 2.5 years now. And I was just
really?
like to say, we're just always trying to tell people actually how it's not as intimidating as it seems, and it's totally doable even on such a small system. Like, you have a small, one panel, 2-3 batteries type of thing. It's totally doable.
Wow, so you've got one...
Just little tiny tricks, right?
You've got one solar panel and just a couple of batteries?
Yes, actually, and we have a 650-watt generator for backup, like you said, if we get a little bit too much cloudage going on, and we actually have a well at a dug well at the bottom of the hill next to the house, so we actually use the generator to charge up a 12-cycle battery, to be able to hook up into a diaphragm. They're called the RV diaphragm pumps. And we pump our water up the hill, up into a big gravity tote that's actually like on a level that's higher than any of our sinks or our toilets in the house. So once every 2 weeks, we use this one battery to pump all the water up the hill, and then from that point, all the water just drains into the house. So you really only have to run a pump like once every week or two, right? We have the water underneath the frost line, try and keep it from freezing during the winter, and so it's good.
Wow. So first of all, like, what prompted you to live off grid?
We've wanted to do this for years, and we just seeing how like pretty much there's no options to live any other way except for, like, you know, if you're going to live in town, you either have to pay rent, and it's just so ridiculous. And then, like, you're talking about the power rates going up. Well, even before they were talking about the power rates going up, but it's just there is different ways to live. You know, you don't have to live a certain way just because it's said that in, you know, I guess the society norm or whatever, right? And how it's just another way of living. And it's like we have some people walk in the house and think they would never say it's off grid because it just looks like a normal house, and it's actually a cabin in the middle of the woods is what it is. But
And so I'm sure Mike and Georgina have some questions for you, but I'm sort of fixated on your your one solar panel and your two batteries. So what are you using the electricity that you're getting through that solar panel? You're not getting a whole lot of it. What would that be? 300 watts?
Roughly around there. Yeah, but actually all we use is we have two lights actually in the house that are hooked up. They're actually 6-watt LED lights, just like hooked up into a regular lamp. And we have 3 lights that are actually rechargeable lights themselves. So these lights so when the solar is on, the solar is actually recharging 3 other lights for when we don't have, sometimes we won't have any power on in the house at all, and we'll just have like a couple candles and like little lights all around, and self-charging batteries. So we have a lot of like different types of battery systems, like almost like independent systems, and like those eliminator, those rechargeable jumper cable, like for jumping up car batteries and stuff. Those are really useful too. And really just we just learned actually that how much electricity we were actually using and how much we didn't really don't need to use that much at all. And little laptop, charge up the laptop and then unplug it, and then you're running off the battery of the laptop. So really, essentially, you don't even really need that much power. And we have internet actually too, so it still takes care of it all.
You got her knocked.
Yeah, well, kind of. So it's little tricks. Just got to figure out little tricks. Like, the well thing I want to say was one of the main took me about a year to figure out exactly how I was going to get the water up the hill, because we had to. We were lugging water for about 2 years, and we didn't have. We were like using an outhouse for like a year, and didn't have any running water, and that kind of thing, right? So we just figured that out a couple of months ago. So I figured, that was a big feat.
Yeah, that's hitting the big time.
Yeah, and then that's like other than that, just power. You just really don't really. If once you evaluate it, you realize that like how much you actually don't need to use, how much water you don't need to use. Actually, that's another thing I wanted to mention too was for showering. We've always heated up, like we have a wood stove on the go, and you have the pot like Mike and Georgina were talking about, and you actually have a 2-gallon pesticide sprayer bottle. And this is like a brand new one. Don't get a used one. And you just warm up the water, add a little bit of cold water to temperature, to like a shower temperature, and then you get it in, and it's like a manual pump. So you can actually fix it on the walls, and then they have like the sprayer nozzle has an actual like control on the pressure, so you can actually get a pressurized 20-minute long hot shower off of 2 gallons of water, and it's totally possible, and it works. So,
wow! And then what are you cooking on?
We're cooking on a wood stove during the winter, and we actually have propane. So actually, for the first year, we had a one of those small Coleman propane stoves that we just cooked outside on the deck. I tarped off a little section just for like a windbreak outside of the cabin. So we're cooking on that when we didn't have the wood stove on the go, but now we have like a full-sized, like regular propane stove.
Well, it sounds like you are a kindred spirit of Mike and Georgina. Either one of you have any questions
Just one.
for Kyle? This is
What
Mike.
do you do, Kyle, for refrigeration?
Oh, here's another thing. Actually, that's another thing I was going to mention. So that was one of our biggest challenges. Actually, we found that we're buying groceries almost every. Well, that's another problem. Is that we're probably not going to be able to buy groceries in your area, right? So what we did, I actually built a root cellar, and I got it in the earth far enough to actually get it so it will not freeze during the winter, and it will not go below. I had a thermometer in there, and we weren't getting 10 degrees during the summertime. Like, it'll be the warmest it'll get in there. So root cellar is pretty much a free refrigerator that will run all year round, and you don't have to pay bills for it.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, what about his well? Would that work for us?
No. I looked at that solution
Okay.
he's talking about and stuff, and in our situation that wouldn't
Okay.
that wouldn't work. And I'm just wondering, are you going to keep your water tote from completely freezing in the winter?
That's what we're dealing with, right? That's our next issue. Actually, what I've been saving up, what my idea is, this is a very strange idea, but I've been saving up the styrofoam that I've been able to find, and I'm going to almost make pretty much piece together a puzzle matrix around the water tote, and then glue all the styrofoam to the tote, wrap it up in a black tarp, and then underneath the tote is a little gap area. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to make a leaf and seaweed compost underneath, and then as the compost decays, it actually creates heat.
Yep.
So the heat will this is the way I'm imagining it, is that the heat will hopefully rise from the compost and actually get inside around, it'll actually warm up the bottom of the tote just to keep it from completely freezing over.
You sound like a real MacGyver like myself.
I know, he does.
That's one idea I have, and if that one doesn't work this winter, we'll figure out something else, I'm sure.
Wow, that's clever.
It
Using
is.
the heat from compost. You'll have to let us know if that works. I hope it does.
Yeah, I hope it does too, yep.
Wow, so you're saving a lot of money.
Yeah, actually, well, once we got it started, with the solar, and we had to get we had the wood stove that was in the spot when we first got it was it wasn't even considered safe at all, not even to light a little tiny fire. So by the time we got all that stuff together, pretty much, the startup was the kind of the kicker, but, once the startup's good, those batteries are good for years, and the panels technically good for ever, really, unless something hits it, actually it damages the panel.
Kyle, I've got to ask you, do you have chickens?
No, that's our plan for next year. We figured that there's too many other little things. We started with vegetables this year, and then next year we're going to start with live things. So right now we're just pretty much carrots, root vegetables, just trying to get stuff in the ground. I'm hauling up as much seaweed and leaves and stuff like that, just trying to build up a big compost heap to just start eventually just keep adding on and just have because the soil's not very good where we're to, we have to build it up.
Wow. The reason I asked about chickens is it just seems that people who are interested in the idea of going off grid, they just come hand in hand with chickens, right, Georgina?
Oh, yes. Well, for us, it's because we can't run out and buy eggs, so.
How many do you have?
6.
Wow. Yeah, so you'll have a good supply of fresh eggs.
Yeah.
Well, Kyle,
how many eggs will you get off of 6 chickens?
Well, supposedly 1 a day, so they're not laying yet. We bought them at a young age, so they're supposed to start laying soon. So I hope they do.
Wicked, yeah. I hope they do for you guys, too.
Yeah, we'll have more than we can eat for sure, but then our neighbors, I'm sure, will happily share them when they come back in the spring.
Perfect.
I love this conversation.
I know.
Kyle, I want to thank you so much for calling in and
Yes,
sharing
thank you,
your
Kyle.
experiences.
Thanks, Kyle.
All right, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for calling in. Good luck.
And I bet you he sleeps so well, good, honest work, keeping your premises going. I bet you two sleep pretty well, too.
Oh, I sleep like a baby.
My guests on the Crosstalk phone in right now, if you're just tuning in, Mike and Georgina Parsons, and they are the couple who have decided not to resettle from Little Bay Islands. Other residents of the island have already moved away, already made that painful transition. Others in the process, a couple more people moved away this week. There are only a handful of people left on the island, right, Mike, right now?
Yeah, I would say there's probably around, Georgina, maybe 20 households.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay.
a good rough estimate, yeah.
Okay. So people facing that very difficult transition, even though people in the community voted in favor of it, it's still incredibly emotional. But Mike and Georgina Parsons setting out on an adventure. They're not going anywhere. That's their adventure. It's just to stay put. And they have gone off grid almost completely already. The power will be cut on Little Bay Islands. The expectation is by the 31st of December. So New Year's Day could be kind of interesting for Mike and Georgina. And also the phone line is expected to be cut at that time as well. So we're asking you to phone in and tell us, would you ever dream of living off the grid, or is that just not for you? One person wrote in on the Facebook page for CBC Newfoundland and Labrador saying, no way. I need skyscrapers. I need glass. I need noise. So no matter how you see it, let us know. If you've already taken a cabin or a home off grid, tell us about that experience. As I was mentioning, many municipalities looking at ways to reduce their energy consumption. I know that so many of our listeners are doing the same thing. Have you investigated solar panels or wind power or other alternative sources of energy? And if you have any questions for Mike and Georgina, you better ask them while they've still got a phone line. So this is probably the one and only time we've got them on the Crosstalk phone in. You never know. We might be able to do it in other ways at some point in the future. But the phone number is for you again, 722-7111 or 1-800-563-8255. Georgina, what are you most nervous about as you two set out on this endeavor?
You know what? A lot of people ask us that, and I say nothing.
Really?
Yeah, and as of now, I can honestly say that. How that may change after when the lights go out and we're here alone. But as of now, I'm not nervous about anything. I will miss my friends a bit. We stay to ourselves for the most part, but usually I do something with my friends on the weekend, play darts or, a few games of sequence, have a couple of sociables. But so that's going to be an adjustment. But with that said, before we move back from Ontario, I will go a couple of months without going out to socialize with anybody. So for me, I think it's not nervous. That'll be my biggest adjustment. Be okay. It's just us again and, being removed from that social situation. But with that said, if the wind cooperates and the ice isn't in, there's no reason I can't jump in the boat and go and see my friends. It just won't be as often.
Right. And Mike, you guys have taken what I think is a brilliant approach to dealing with your deep freezers, because you have more deep freezers than I've ever heard of anyone having, unless they owned a corner store or a grocery store. Tell me how many you've got.
We have, I think, 6 now. Is it, Georgina?
I think it's about 6.
Yeah, we have 6, and they're stuffed right to the brim right now with moose and beef and pork and lamb and, of course, fish. And, right now these deep freezers they're not in our main house. They're actually in our shed and stuff. So when the power goes off, we won't need power to run those, at least for the winter months. And so we'll just, when the power goes, we'll just leave them unplugged, and of course they'll be fine. And then in the spring, of course, we'll downsize from those 6 to our solar system will support a couple of small deep freezers.
I think that's just brilliant, right? I never would have thought of that, but it's kind of like what Kyle was suggesting, that you don't just think about flicking a switch on or off. You just think, what do I need to do? I need to keep this food frozen. What's the easiest way to do that? So you're going to use nature for part of that.
Yeah, and with if we have tons of food left in our deep freeze, like moose and beef and whatnot, left over, we'll just do what everybody has always done here, which is just bottle or can the meat and stuff, and of course, stored properly, that stuff is good for years.
Yeah. So do you think that you are oversupplied now because it's a guessing game, right, for your first winter?
Well, certainly on the protein side we are. And we still have to stockpile dry goods, but we will err on the side of having more as opposed to less, because, like I said, there may be time periods where we can't get off the island for weeks at a time. So yeah. we'll be safe as far as food. What's the longest period of time you think you might look at being completely isolated on Little Bay Islands, unable to get off? I suspect the worst case scenario will be a month-long stretch. I mean, if the previous years are any indication with the Arctic ice, you're probably looking at a month. And I mean, last winter was an exception to that, and we hardly got any amount of Arctic ice. So maybe a stretch of 4 or 5 days when the Arctic ice would prevent you. Now, that's one condition. The ice, of course, the winters on the North Atlantic aren't necessarily always suitable to cross the open water in our boats and stuff. So, I'd say on the worst case scenario where we actually can't get anywhere would probably be like 6 weeks. We've got Sharon, who's called in from St. John's to speak to you, too. Hello, Sharon. Thanks for the call.
Hi there. And my congratulations as well to Mike and Georgina. They're doing something that I'm in the process of doing myself. I have a cabin in Notre Dame Bay that kind of looks across to Fogo Island, and I've dug the well, I've put in the septic system, and I have some panels standing by. I do have one battery and the RV pump, so I'm sort of getting there. But I was fascinated. Who are these solar guys that you were talking about? Because I can't seem to find anybody who could put together a package for me.
Well, the company that we're dealing with, actually most of the people we are dealing with are NL Off Grid. So if you on the website, if you just type nloffgrid.ca, you can find their website. And these guys have been great to deal with, very experienced. One of the co-owners actually been off the grid himself for like 15 years. So they have a lot of experience and, great folks to talk to. So we'd highly recommend those.
Are they around in the central area? Because I was dealing with a few companies that were having trouble staying in business. They seem to be, talking about getting shut down some years ago. And they were selling panels, but I didn't get back to them quickly enough to buy some more panels. And that's in Conception Bay. So what I'm wondering about is, who did you get that's close to your area?
Well, this company is actually out of St. John's, but they travel all over the island. I mean, they're doing installations all over the island. So, I mean, obviously they come out here, which, that requires taking a ferry and everything. And eventually, they'll probably have to come out by boat if anything needs servicing. But like I said, they've been very forthcoming with us and folks out here. So, they'll pretty much go wherever you need them to go if it's at all practical to get there.
Right. Do you have people coming, kind of like visiting your setup there and looking for instructions?
We've had people coming that have been curious about our system, and obviously some folks here, all the people here that are interested in going off-grid have come and looked at our system, and they actually came and did a presentation, the NL Off-Grid folks, to the town, so, and answered a bunch of questions and stuff. But, yeah, we've been kind of the local expertise now since we've been up and running, and, I'm the type of person, I do a ton of research before I embark on anything. So I was already, pretty well versed in the technologies and stuff. But there's been quite a bit of interest.
That's wonderful. I've been thinking that it would be a wonderful business opportunity for somebody to open up a shop that's called Off the Grid, and kind of sell everything that would be of interest that takes up very little power, or that helps you, kind of treats all of your issues, basically living off the grid.
Yeah.
I found out that I would have to pay $22,000 to bring an electric pole less than half a kilometer.
Oh my!
Ouch.
And that kind of that really set me going, and I started thinking, well, if I could afford that and wanted to put the telephone pole up, then you bring the pole out to where you are, and you've paid all that money, and pretty soon there's a community going there. And it's one of those situations where you have to be very inventive, I guess, to get around all of the issues just to have a cabin. Now, I don't intend to move into this place full time, but I really would like to spend my summers there without having to worry too much. And so I try to find out as much as I can about what appliances and, trying to buy a propane fridge. Your idea of a year-round root cellar, that's a wonderful idea, to get some of the old-fashioned ways of living off the grid back on the grid, if you like. And that's going to be helpful. And one store that could provide all this information would be really invaluable.
Yeah, it's a great idea, Sharon. I'm so glad you called in, and good luck with getting your solar panels for your cabin.
I will get right online to NL Off Grid.
Yes, look them up. You won't be disappointed.
And just tell Aaron and Shane that Mike and Georgina sent you.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll write their names down right away.
And I'm going to scoot along to the next caller here. We've got Merv Wiseman phoning in. He is pulled over on the road near Come By Chance. Hi, Merv. Long time no talk.
Yes, it is. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to your guests, Michael and Georgina. I just couldn't resist calling in. My God, I so admire what you're doing, and of course, the connection that I have with that area makes it even more appealing to watch and understand, the dynamics of what you're going through at the moment. I really, really admire. My father, of course, came from Little Bay Islands, moved to Long Island, all 3 miles away, and came from a family of 14 there, Ramona, and we had a big family. And I recall very succinctly, I don't want to date myself too much, that you want to talk about being off the grid. Well, we didn't know what a grid was. We didn't know what light and power was. We lived by the kerosene lamp I think, about 11, 12 years old before we brought the small engines in to generate the electricity. In terms of highways, we didn't have a highway. I was 14 years old before we had a car on Long Island. We lived in total isolation. My youngest brother was actually born. My mother transited off Long Island on the ice by dog sled, and went to the hospital, and that's the way my youngest brother was born. So, yeah, a bit of a backdrop there, and it's when I see what Michael is doing and Georgina, it connects so intently. And would I do it again? I'm not sure. I don't think I'd be able to talk my wife into it, although she did come from an island herself, on Sunday Cove Island there in Port Anson, and so not immune to that, that kind of isolation. But I think living off the grid, I think Michael and Georgina would seem to be doing in a more modern context, if you will. I mean, the availability of solar power, the availability of wind turbines, and all that technology and so on does make it a little easier. But anyway, I don't want to take up too much time, but I just simply had to call and connect with Michael and Georgina today. Thank you for putting them on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Merv. And I've heard all those same stories from my dad, because as you know, my dad moved from Long Island to Little Bay Island, so there is certainly a strong connection there between our families.
There is, and look, I just can't get over the contrast, and really quickly in the continuum of time, that this transition from what was really a thriving business community. I mean, Little Bay Islands was the center of commerce for the entire bay, and if you wanted a job when I was growing up, and quite a number of years after, you went to Little Bay Islands and worked in the fish plant, or even building, some of the longliner, the shipbuilding, if you will. And, it was, believe it or not, it was the sports mecca of the world when it came to things like soccer, 24th of May, and all the festivities around all that. People migrated there from all over the bay, and a tremendous history there. And to know that we've still got that connection, and I'm just so amazed with the writings and the reflections, Michael, you and Georgina have put online and so on. And it's became a journey, not just necessarily of technology and trying to survive in isolation, but it's become one of a social journey. I think the transition from modern day society to resettlement and how all that happens. So there's so much. You're a great study, and you guys have become celebrities. I'm sure you know that.
Thanks again, Murph. Really appreciate the call.
Murph.
Absolutely. Take care.
Just before I get to the next caller, Mike and Georgina, we've had two people call into our studio with a very practical question. They each have had the same question. They want to know what you're going to do in the event of a medical emergency.
I think I'll address this one because
Sure.
that's come up several times on our site. We've done so much planning for this. So I just recently became certified in first aid. Mike is going to do the course online. I just had a video Medicare call with our family doctor yesterday, Dr. Todd Young. So he's fully on board, 110% supportive of what we're doing. He already treats us like that and knows our medical history. We've bought survival suits in case we do need to cross in the winter when it's stormy. If it is stormy and something happens to us, we're prepared for that. We both said there's nowhere else we'd, not to sound negative or whatever, but there's no place we'd rather die. We'd die happy here. But we realize the chances of an emergency and the chances of that happening at a time when it's too windy or there's too much ice are very slim. We think you're probably at a bigger risk just on day-to-day commuting, you know what I mean? But we've done pretty much everything we can to be prepared for that. Oh, also I'm in the process of speaking with St. John Ambulance to ask them what kind of first aid kit they'd recommend to have on hand, so for somebody remote. So we're going to have on hand more medical supplies than the average household would, say, if you were in St. John's or even in Springdale.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Of course.
And,
yeah.
and I'll just add, Ramona, that because we get this question quite often.
Yeah.
I mean, we really look at it no different than I often say, well, what do all the fishing vessels do that are hundreds of miles off the coast if anything goes wrong? I mean, there's search and rescue. They're there to provide a service in the event that something happens. I mean, in terms of isolation, there are far more isolated communities in Canada's north than Little Bay Islands, and if in the unfortunate event that something happens, they'll get to you eventually. Hopefully, and if they don't, like Georgina said, then we're willing to take that risk. I mean, statistically, as Georgina said, you getting on the Trans-Canada, you run a far greater risk of something bad happening than you do living out here on Little Bay Island.
And to add one more thing, my first aid instructor brought up a good point. He said, for us, we're young and healthy right now. If that changes, we'll deal with it. But he said, for us, the big thing is prevention. So just being super careful. If we're cutting wood, we're going to have the proper gear. We're handling our fire, we're going to be super careful. So like he said, for us, it's prevention, hopefully. So hopefully that answers their questions, yeah. In the unlikely event that we need it, we'd hope the service would get here, but statistically, I hope we'll never have to use that service.
Indeed. I'm sure everyone is behind you on that thought. We hope you never need any emergency medical assistance. I must get to our next caller. We've got Wilfred Bartlett, who's calling in from Long Pond. Hi, Wilfred.
Hi, Ramona and Mike and Georgina. How are you doing?
Good.
I Wilf. I've heard your name from my father on more than one occasion.
That's for sure. Yes, I grew up with your father, shut down Long Island. Like Merv said just about everything that I wanted to say. But unlike Merv, shut down a lot older. I never ever seen a car on Long Island. And I left there at age 17 with the derelict. Certainly, I always said I want to, to get enough money to buy a boat. But anyway, what I call about today, so they wish you luck and everything else. And your grandmother, right up to the day that she died, we were the best kind of friends. Every time I go to Long Island, certainly, I certainly have to go down and see her. And most of the reason I call today is it's very sad to see a town like Little Bayonne is gone by the wayside, because as Merv said, it was a place of commerce. I mean, I can remember growing up there with all the schooners and everything else there. Frank Rowan from Long Island was always had one of the strongest schooners go down the Belle Island and Labrador coast. And up till there was one time that Strong's had 40 schooners sailing out of Little Bay Islands right up the Labrador coast. I mean, so many people employed around the bay and everything else and it's so sad to see it go today.
Yeah, what vivid images you're producing for us, Wilfred. Yeah, so
yes.
would you ever consider living off grid yourself?
Well, I would, but right now I'm too old. I mean, I put a cabin up in the woods every year, spent a lot of time up there, and I live now to grid the same as Mike and them are doing there now. But I didn't have an outside toilet. I just stuck one of the toilets now right in the corner of the room. One of them is now the toilets they got now, just flicking this all to it, right? A little bit of water from the wash your dishes would flush the toilet. So, and I got my root cellar home certainly, and I grew my own vegetables last 30 years and all that, right? So I'm kind of going back to the future, like you say. But it reminds me of my time growing up there on Long Island. There was one phone on Long Island at that time, and my mother was a postmaster. She had it, right? But you'll have no trouble getting hold of Mike because he got his cell phone and everything else. We don't need landlines anymore, Ramona.
Thanks so much for the call, Wilfred. Really appreciate it.
Best of luck, Mike and Georgina. I'm sure you'll do okay.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you very much.
And this is an email that Gerard sent in to crosstalk@cbc.ca. Gerard saying, my family, like many, lived off-grid until we were teenagers. We had an outhouse, we had wells, lamps, cellars, a pantry, and storehouses. We had to carry every drop of water. Electricity came when I was 13. I'm older now, and I could live off-grid, but Gerard says, with illness or children, I would not. Yeah, so it's back to the future for you two, like everyone's saying.
Well, there is a certain romantic idea, as both Merv and Wolf alluded to about, kind of getting back to nature and stuff. And even though, I mean, certainly, we're going off the grid in a most modern way, I certainly appreciate and understand, the romance of, being self-sufficient and growing your own and all that stuff. And it's something that's always appealed to me. And I'm just glad I found someone crazy enough to do it with me.
I should mention, before we run out of time, that you two, and you referred to it earlier, Georgina, you two have this fantastic blog that people can check out on Facebook. You've got amazing photos that you put up there, and just share some of your experiences with everyone. So when I looked up at your Kintsugi, if I'm saying it right, blog, I really love the photo of you guys toasting your bagels on the wood stove.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty dreamy image to me. So it's spelled KINTSUGI. It's on Facebook. It's KINTSUGI. And if you didn't have a pen handy to jot that down, if you just search for Mike Parsons and blog on Facebook, you'll find a link to it.
Yes, we'd
well.
love some more followers. Our blog took off more than we ever even imagined, and we love it. We hear from people all over the world, and it's exciting. We love to check it and see people's comments, and even helpful hints like Kyle, who called in earlier. There's a few helpful hints there. I'm going to try out that pesticide bottle, like you said, before I invest in hot water on demand.
Right. And that's the clean unused
Yes,
pesticide
yeah.
bottle that he uses for a shower, using water that's heated up from the wood stove.
And if I can add one more thing quickly,
Sure.
if we have time. Will's just alluded to it. If he was younger, he would, absolutely do this. And that's a common sentiment out here. Again, part of the reason Little Bay Island is resettling is due to the aging population. So unfortunately, the majority of people are, getting older where this isn't something practical. So we have a lot of close friends who they're like just so envious, and they're saying, oh, if this was even 15 years ago, I'd be staying too. And so for them, it's not that there's a lot of people, not that they don't want to, it's just not practical right now. But those same people are definitely coming back in the summertime months where, say, if they had a health issue, it's not so much of a concern to be able to get off the island if they needed help and so forth.
Yeah, it makes sense. I want to thank you both so much for joining me on the Crosstalk phone-in today. It's been a real pleasure. You're taking us on your adventure, and all I can say is you two have to write a book. It's required. Thank you so much, Mike and Georgina Parsons, and best of luck with your adventure.
Thank you, Ramona.
Bye now.
And I just have time to say that the winners of our books are Kyle and Sharon. So we've got a couple of great books going to them. I want to thank everyone who called in today. And thanks again to Mike and Georgina for helping us all dream a little bit. Have a great afternoon.